Hello students, welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking up some of the very important articles that have appeared in various business related newspapers and we'll be analyzing these particular articles. For this particular video, I've taken the articles during the time period of 13th of January to 26th of January 2020. And the articles that I've chosen are from Business Line, Hindu, Business Standard, Indian Express and Live Mint. Let's begin the discussion. The first article is related to Make in India. Before I discuss the points given in the article, please understand, Government of India in the last couple of decades has taken various initiatives to promote a manufacturing sector in India. The prominent reason why manufacturing sector is focused is because manufacturing sector is labor intensive. Lot of employment opportunities can be created by promotion of manufacturing sector. And since India has already huge amount of human labor, one of the ways of attracting this particular human labor is by promoting more and more manufacturing sector activity. So in order to promote a manufacturing sector, government in the last decade itself promoted the concept of SEZs, Special Economic Zones. But the performance of SEZs has not been up to the satisfactory expectation. One very important point related to the problem in SEZ is that the government promoted the concept of SEZ or model of SEZ in order to promote more and more manufacturing activity. But as per various surveys, I'll quote here the CAG report itself, more than 2/3 of the units which are set up in the SEZ are service sector units or IT/ITES units. So the objective of promoting manufacturing was not successful by the promotion of SEZ model. Then government came out with the concept of NMP, National Manufacturing Policy, in the year 2011. Under this particular concept of NMP, Government of India had put certain objectives forward. One was to promote manufacturing activity through the concept of national investment and manufacturing zones. Second, they wanted to ensure that the manufacturing activity will keep on increasing by 12 to 14% on annual basis. Third, they will be creating 100 million jobs under the concept of a national manufacturing policy. And fourth, the contribution of manufacturing sector, which was around 16% to the total GDP, would be increased to 25% under this particular concept of NMP. And the new government in the year 2014 introduced a new policy or a new scheme to promote manufacturing in India and called this scheme as Make in India program. This particular program was the brainchild of the DIPP and implemented in such a way that the investments in the manufacturing sector will be attracted both from the domestic sources as well as the foreign sources. And the objective was to ensure that 100 million jobs would be created. The manufacturing sector will grow by 12 to 14% per annum, and the contribution from the manufacturing sector to GDP will be 25%. Now, to achieve these particular objectives, certain steps or measures were taken by Government of India, such as they introduced a concept of ebiz.gov.in, which was a concept of a single window clearance system. The government introduced new processes, new infrastructure segments under the concept of a Make in India. They identified 25 sectors which would be covered under Make in India. They introduced investor facilitation cell to promote more and more investment into the manufacturing, so on and so forth. So in simple terms, large number of measures have been taken by Government of India to promote manufacturing in India under the ambit of Make in India. This article discusses what has been the evaluation of this particular scheme. Please understand, whenever these kind of big schemes which will have overarching objectives are implemented, these schemes cannot be evaluated within a short duration. But this article says a 5-year time period is more than sufficient to evaluate the effectiveness of these kind of schemes. So the effectiveness of this particular scheme has been evaluated under 3 very important objectives. One, what has been the performance of Make in India under concept of employment creation? What has been the performance of Make in India under investment? What has been the performance of Make in India in terms of production? Let me start with the first one, investment. In this particular period, during which Make in India has been implemented, the investment in the form of capital formation has actually declined for Indian economy. The data which has been provided in this particular article is that the investment has declined from 31.3% for the financial year 2014 to 28.6% of GDP for the financial year 18. Please understand, although commonly using the term investment, this actually refers to gross fixed capital formation. The idea of a gross fixed capital formation is that the total amount of investment as a percent of GDP is given as a capital formation or gross capital formation. In this particular gross capital formation, there are two components. How much is gross fixed capital formation and how much is the inventories. To put in simple terms, a bank might give loan to a businessman or a manufacturer. This particular businessman or manufacturer utilize this particular loan to purchase raw material and to produce goods in the market. These are basically put under the concept of inventories. And rather than producing goods, what if the same manufacturer utilizes a loan to set up a new manufacturing facility? Such a type of immovable assets are part of a gross fixed capital formation. So the gross fixed capital formation in case of India for the financial year 14 was 31.3%, and by financial year 18 it has fallen down to 28.6%. Within this particular gross capital formation, there are three stakeholders. One is the government, and the second one is the private sector, and the third one is the households. Because the savings can be done by all the three, these particular savings will be rooted into the market in the form of an investment. And these investments can be utilized to form fixed assets or movable assets. That is the concept of a gross fixed capital formation as well as inventories. Now please understand, as per this particular article, one of the reasons why GFCF has declined is because the household savings have declined during the same time period. Since the household savings have declined, the gross fixed capital formation also has declined. Now some of you will have this doubt. What is the impact of this particular decline in GFCF? Please understand, as per various surveys, more than 60% of the total savings in case of Indian economy are from the households itself. So when the savings in the households will decline, the total savings in the economy will decline. And when total savings in the economy declines, the capital formation in the economy will also decline. Having said so, the article also says that on one side the savings in the households have declined, and on the other side the savings from the private sector have increased. But overall the impact is that the gross fixed capital formation has come down from 31.3% to 28.6%. So this is the performance of Make in India under the concept of investment. Second one, production. This particular concept of a production in this particular article has been discussed under the ambit of Index of Industrial Production. Now what is this idea of an IIP? IIP is one of the indices which are used to measure the variation in the total volume of production that happens in the manufacturing sector. Now this particular IIP measures how much volume changes in the production has happened from one reference period to the next reference period. The usual causation or the linkage is that when IIP increases, you expect GDP also to increase. So the performance of Make in India has been measured under the concept of Index of Industrial Production. As per the information given in this particular article, for majority of the period between 2012 to 2019, Index of Industrial Production on monthly basis has averaged around 3%. In many of the months in this particular tenure also, the IIP was in negative terms. That is, the production had contracted rather than expanding in the market. In simple terms, the production has not increased as per the expected numbers under Make in India. And finally, with respect to employment, the article says Government of India has not been able to publish or has blocked many of the publications which are related to the concept of employment generation during this particular tenure. So these are some of the very important points given in this particular article. But more importantly, understand this. The article says the Indian economy requires many more reforms rather than having just a window dressing policy of promotion of manufacturing. That is, the government should focus on introducing many of the structural reforms if the economic growth has to be increased or manufacturing sector growth has to be increased. Now, what type of structural reforms am I referring to here? Government of India needs to implement reforms in terms of let's say enforcement of contracts, which has been one of the biggest issues with the foreign companies which are functioning in case of India. Government of India should focus on making land acquisition much more easier, because land is one of the very important precursors for any infrastructure, and in case of India the biggest issue with infrastructure has been land acquisition. Government of India should make or implement many more reforms under the labor subject itself. So these are some of the areas which Government of India should look into to promote more and more manufacturing activity in the domestic market. So these are some of the very important points which are discussed in this particular article. Now based on this, let's have a look at some of the questions. Consider the following statements about Make in India. It was launched in 2014, correct? Automobile, food processing, biotechnology are few of the sectors covered under Make in India. Yes, it is correct. There are totally 25 sectors and these are 3 sectors out of the 25 sectors. So the right option will be option C, both are true. Based on the discussion that we have had so far, I have also given one descriptive question. The economy needs much more than the policy window dressing for increasing the manufacturing activity. Elaborate in 250 words. So this is a total discussion related to Make in India and its evaluation in the last couple of years. The next article is related to edible oil imports. Very recently, a newspaper article has quoted that Government of India is looking into a proposal to cap imports of edible oil into India. Some of the very important points are India's dependency on edible oil imports is very, very high. More than 2/3 of the total edible oil that is consumed in the domestic market or demanded in the domestic market is basically imported into India. And over a period of time, this particular dependency on the imports of edible oil in case of India has increased. The problem with this is, as the charges of these particular edible oils or the prices of these particular edible oils will vary because of external factors as well as internal factors, the market prices of these particular edible oils will also keep on varying. Second, the dependency is very, very high. When India imports huge amount of edible oil into India, it also means precious forex reserves are flowing out of India. In case of the palm oil, which is one of the biggest edible oil that is consumed in case of India, huge amount of production of this particular palm oil is done in case of 2 countries, Indonesia and Malaysia. And very recently, Government of India has tried to impose certain restrictions or introduce certain guidelines. For example, any importer of a palm oil from these particular countries, that is from Malaysia, will have to first take a license from Government of India. So Government of India is trying to basically look into this particular situation of edible oil imports into India. Now, apart from this, what are the important facts which are given in the article? 1. The total demand for the edible oil in the domestic market is expected to be around 23 to 24 million tons. And the production of this particular edible oil in India is 7.5 to 8 million tons. The total amount of oil seed production in India is around 28 to 30 million tons, from which the oil is extracted comes around 7.5 to 8 million tons. Since there is a huge mismatch between how much is being demanded, how much is being produced in the domestic market, the rest of it, that is around 2/3 of it, is basically imported into the domestic market. And this particular import has kept on increasing in the last couple of years. Apart from this, Government of India now says they want to increase the total oilseed production in the domestic market. Presently, as already mentioned, total value of domestic production is somewhere in the range of 30 million tons. Government of India wants to increase this particular total oilseed production from 30 million tons to 47 million tons by 2024-25. The stated objective is, if I increase the oilseed production, the dependency on the import of edible oil will come down. And when the dependency will come down, my total outlay which I will have to spend to import this particular oil will also come down. As per Government of India's estimate, Government of India spends around 75,000 crore rupees to import this particular oil into India. So if I can increase the production, the dependency will come down, outflow will also come down. And in order to increase this particular production of oil seed, Government of India is expected to launch National Mission on Edible Oil program in the next 3 months. This has been one of the very important initiatives that is being proposed by the government. Second, please understand, various experts have stated that many countries in the global market have allowed the production of GM crops through which they are basically processing the edible oil. In case of India, there are certain issues surrounding the concept of a GM crops. The only commercial GM crop that has been allowed for commercial cultivation in case of India has been cotton. After that, there has been an issue with GM mustard, which is one of the oil seed that we need to promote production in India. There has been a problem with respect to commercial introduction of GM brinjal, which has been put on a back burner now. So there is a need to promote GM crop cultivation in case of India, especially in the oilseed area. Because if I can promote the GM crop, usually these kind of GM crops are associated with increased productivity. And if I can increase the production as well as the productivity by promoting the GM crop cultivation, the import dependence on the edible oils will also come down. And the article says already some of the countries which have produced GM oil seeds are processing and selling this particular oil to India. The countries which have been quoted in this particular article are rapeseed oil is being imported from Canada, soybean oil which is being imported into India from Argentina. Some of these particular edible oils are from the GM crops itself. So various experts have stated that Government of India should promote the oilseed production by using GM varieties so that the production as well as productivity will also increase. So these are the two recommendations which have been given in this particular article. Apart from this, some of the very important points or information that has been provided is palm oil is the major edible oil and total potential area for cultivation of palm oil in case of India is 1.9 million hectares. But the total land under cultivation is around 3 lakh hectares only. Apart from this, Andhra Pradesh accounts for majority of the total land coverage for cultivation of palm oil. That is, Andhra Pradesh as a state accounts for around 55% of the total 3 lakh hectares which is used for the cultivation of palm oil. Apart from this, article also says that if Government of India can give certain exemptions to this particular land which is used for the cultivation of palm oil under the concept of a land ceiling act, the cultivation or the land that is covered under the palm oil will expand. The total production of palm oil will increase. So these are the points which are given in this particular article. Based on this, let's have a look at a question here. Consider the following statements about edible oils. India imports around 2/3 of its vegetable oil requirement. Yes, correct. Or edible oil requirement also you can say. Malaysia is one of the biggest producer of palm. Yes, along with Indonesia. So these are the two countries which account for majority of the palm oil production in the global market. So the right option will be both 1 and 2 are true. That is option C. Next article is related to cash reserve ratio. Before we look at the concepts given in this particular article, what is a cash reserve ratio? Please understand, every bank will collect deposits which are famously referred to as NDTL, net demand and time liabilities. These particular liabilities are nothing but the deposits which are collected by the banking sector under two heads, demand deposits and time deposits. To just put it in a crude form, if I as a depositor keep certain type of a deposit in a bank, these are classified under two heads. If I keep a deposit and demand it whenever the need arises, these kind of deposits are called as demand deposits. Best example, SB accounts. And if I keep this particular deposit for a specific time period with the bank, these are called as a time deposits. Best example, fixed deposits. Again, there are many other types of deposits with the bank which will fall majorly under these two types. But for UPSC, this is more than sufficient. These kind of deposits are called as a net demand and time liabilities. Now, some of these particular deposits which are collected by the bank has to be kept with RBI for a specific purpose. Now, what is this particular specific purpose I am referring to? RBI says if I do not collect anything from this particular bank, that is, when the bank collects money from the depositors, if I don't take away part of it, these banks would simply take a higher risk by lending this particular money in the market or invest all of this money in the market. So RBI will ensure some of these particular deposits which are collected by the bank will be deposited with RBI in order to ensure that the deposits of the people with the banks are safe. This particular ratio is called as cash reserve ratio. I'll repeat the process again. Cash reserve ratio is a percentage of net demand and time liabilities that the banks will have to keep with RBI. That is the first point. Second point, on this particular CRR that the banks will keep with RBI, bank shall not pay any interest to the respective banks. I'll repeat the point again. On this particular deposits that the bank will keep with RBI, RBI shall not pay any rate of interest to this particular bank. But having said so, please understand, when the bank collects a deposit from me and let's say keeps a part of it with RBI, bank promises to pay me interest on the full deposit. But part of it which is deposited with RBI by the bank doesn't earn anything for this particular bank. This is basically referred to as negative carry on CRR. Let me take an example. Imagine I've got 100 crore rupees. I'll go to a bank and I'll deposit this particular 100 crore rupees with the bank. Let it be either time deposit or demand deposit, don't worry about it. So I will deposit this particular 100 crore rupees with the bank. And right now CRR, let's say, is 4%, which means bank has to take away 4 crores out of this and deposit this with RBI. On this particular 4 crore, RBI will not pay any interest to the bank. Having said so, bank has promised me that interest will be paid on full 100 crore rupees. But the bank is left with only 96 crore rupees to lend in the market, assuming there is no SLR. So you can see that on one side, bank can earn interest only on 96, but has to pay interest on full 100 crore rupees. So this particular interest on 4 crore, which is paid by the bank to me, but bank is not earning anything on this particular 4 crore, is called as a negative carry on CRR. Now why this is important? Whenever the bank will decide its lending rates, one of the factors that they consider while deciding the lending rate is a negative carry on CRR. So these are some of the very important points related to cash reserve ratio. Now, what has been given in this particular article? The article says that this particular concept of a CRR or the policy of the CRR has to be reviewed. As per the points given in the article, banks collectively keep around 5.25 trillion rupees in the form of a CRR with Reserve Bank of India. And on this particular 5.25 trillion, these particular banks are not earning any amount of interest. But on the other side, these are paying annually around 25,000 crore rupees in the form of interest because of this particular CRR. So on one side, you want the banking sector to expand its credit in the market so that there is a virtuous cycle which is followed, which will revive the growth rates for the Indian economy. But on the other side, a considerable chunk of these particular deposits is stuck with RBI, Reserve Bank of India, on which the banks are paying interest without earning anything. So the banking sector, which is already burdened with higher non-performing assets, increasing issue of willful defaulters, problem with their profits, this is another burden on the banking sector. So this article says this particular policy of a CRR is neither affordable nor relevant in the present context. Apart from this, in many of the countries such as Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Denmark, this kind of a requirement of maintaining deposits has been reduced to zero. So if other countries can follow it, why not in case of India? And as such, the central banker in case of India is basically following the model which is being followed in case of OECD countries. For example, concept of inflation targeting was introduced in OECD much before India introduced that in 2016. And apart from this, this particular concept of a debt to GDP ratio or following this particular parameter was much before followed in case of OECD countries, then it was followed in case of India. So if we can follow these particular concepts which were introduced in OECD economies in India, why not decrease these kind of reserve requirements which have already been done in case of OECD economies. As per this particular article, in case of OECD economies, these kind of legal requirements, that is CRR type of requirements, have been watered down to around 1.5% to 2%. So why not the Reserve Bank of India follow the same concept, reduce the CRR, which will basically help the banking sector by giving more money in the hands of the banking sector, which will increase the credit supply in the market, which will reduce the interest rates, which in turn will lead to the virtuous cycle in the Indian economy. So these are some of the points which are discussed in this particular article. Now, based on this, let's have a look at a question here. Consider the following statements about CRR. It has to be calculated based on NDTL with the banking sector. Yes. At present, the CRR has been fixed by SEBI at 4%. This is wrong. CRR is fixed by Reserve Bank of India. So the right option will be option A. Only first statement is true. The next article is related to concept of VRR, voluntary retention route. Before we look at what has been given in the article, some of the very important points are, one of the ways the foreign flows will come into Indian market is the concept of FPI, foreign portfolio investment, under which a large number of foreign financial institutions will bring in money and invest in the stock market. Now please understand, since the concept of a FPI comes under the capital account of balance of payments, there are certain restrictions which are imposed either by the regulator or by the government of India. That is, how much money can flow into India, in what areas they can flow into the Indian market. There are certain restrictions which are imposed on these kind of flows. In case of India, there is certain amount of a threshold percentage which has been fixed, that is on FPI flows which will flow into the debt market as well as equity market. The total amount of flows are restricted to be around 6.5 trillion rupees. Now please understand, apart from this, the issue with FPI is that it is referred to as hot money. That is, FPI will flow into any economy and move from one economy to another economy within an instant. Because there is a flow from one market to another market at a very rapid pace like this particular money is called as hot money. But the problem with this kind of a flow is that these kind of flows will create instability or volatility in the market. Let me elaborate on this. For example, there is a foreign financial institution X which has invested heavily in the Indian stock market. Now let's assume Indian stock market is doing well and Indian economy is also doing well. But if this particular company feels that their returns, if they had invested the money in US market would have been better, then they will basically withdraw their investment from the Indian stock market, take the money out of India and invest back in the US stock market. But while this particular process is going on, the stock market in case of India will experience a certain volatility and the forex market will also experience certain volatility. So these kind of cross-border financial flows will create instability or volatility in the market. How do you control these kind of instability or volatilities which are created? RBI introduced a new scheme or a new tool called as voluntary retention route. Under this particular voluntary retention route, RBI said, whatever restrictions are imposed on you with respect to investment in the debt market as well as the equity market, these kind of restrictions to a certain extent will be relaxed. Or I will exempt you from these kind of restrictions to a certain extent. Having said so, there is one condition. Whatever money you bring into Indian market and invest in the Indian stock market, certain part of it will have to be locked in India for a period of 3 years. I'll repeat the process again. That is, whatever investments have been brought into India by these particular FPIs, 3/4 of these particular investments will have to be locked in the Indian market itself for at least a time period of 3 years. So if a foreign portfolio investor accepts this particular condition by RBI, then the first preference will be given to these particular investors. That is, RBI said, anybody who comes first to me, that is first come first serve basis, anybody who comes first and pledges to invest 2/3 of their investment in the Indian market only for at least a period of 3 years will be given the first option. Now, within whatever investment limit that RBI has been fixed, under which they are going to allow the FPI to flow in the form of VRR into the Indian market, the first preference will be given to any investor who will come and accept this particular condition. Now, what do you mean by this? Let's say hypothetically, RBI has fixed an investor limit of 100 crore rupees under the VRR. So, if I go to RBI and if I am FPI and I say that I am okay to invest 2/3 of my investment in India for a period of 3 years, then whatever my investment will be brought into India will be accepted by RBI on the first come first serve basis. Now, if I bring in 10 crore rupees, then under this particular window, 90 crore rupees will be left out to be brought in by FPIs in the Indian market. So earlier, RBI basically has introduced this particular concept of a VRR, voluntary retention route, under which a ceiling or a limit of 75,000 crore rupees was kept. Now, this has been done in order to ensure that the volatility in the Indian market or stock market will be reduced, because FPIs have pledged to stay for a certain period of time and invest a certain amount only in the Indian market. Now, earlier, RBI had fixed this particular window at a limit of 75,000 crore rupees. Now, RBI has increased this particular window from 75,000 crore rupees to 1,50,000 crore rupees. And as a result of this, it is expected that the volatility in the stock market will be reduced. These are some of the points which have been given in this particular article. The next article is related to sugar subsidies. Some of the very important points are: 1. Government of India announces MSP, that is a minimum support price for more than 20 agriculture commodities. Within this, please understand, one crop is sugar, for which government doesn't pay MSP, rather announces FRP. Now, what is the concept of FRP? FRP stands for Fair and Remunerative Prices. FRP, though, is announced by Government of India, or to be more precise, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. It is the price which is paid by the sugar mill owner to the sugar producer. Let me elaborate. Let's assume here is a sugarcane producer or farmer. He takes this particular sugarcane, sells it to sugar mill owner, who will convert this particular sugarcane into sugar and sell it in the market. The price which is paid by this particular sugar mill owner to the sugarcane producer is FRP, Fair and Remunerative Price, which is fixed by Government of India. So please understand, in case of MSP, government pays the price. In case of FRP, government decides the price which is paid by the sugar mill owner. So this is one way Government of India ensures that there is a market price or a fixed market price for this particular sugar cane if it is purchased by the sugar mill owner. Now, this has been alleged as a subsidy by various other countries such as Brazil for that matter. Apart from this, there are various other types of subsidies which are given by government to these particular sugarcane producers or sugar mill owners who are exporters. One, there is a freight assistance which is provided. There is a state level subsidy for exports. There is a export incentive which is given to sugar exporters. For example, in the year 2018 and 2019 itself, Government of India set up a target of 5 million tons worth of exports of sugar from the domestic market to the international market, so that the sugar prices which were declining will be arrested. So various countries such as Australia and Brazil have approached WTO against these kind of sugar subsidies or sugarcane subsidies which are given by Government of India to the farmers. One country which has been one of the vocal voices against these particular subsidies is the country of Brazil. Brazil accounts for huge amount of exports of sugar to the international market. On one side, it says that India is giving these kind of subsidies to the sugar exporters, but the exports from India to the international market under the sugar is only around 5%, whereas around 35% of the total global exports come from Brazil itself. Second, it alleges that Government of India has doubled FRP, as a result of which it is a kind of a subsidy which is given to the sugarcane producers. But on the other side, the contention is that FRP is not given by Government of India. FRP is decided by Government of India and it is paid by the sugar mill owners. And apart from this, there are a lot of other issues which have been raised against the types of subsidies which are given by Government of India. But Government of India has contested that these are production related subsidies which are allowed to be given by these respective governments. So recently, when the president of Brazil visited India, various groups have asked the prime minister to raise this particular issue of sugar subsidies, against which Brazil has approached WTO. So this is a basic discussion provided in this particular article.